Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch, powered by the Private Pension Administrator of Malaysia, the central administrator for private retirement schemes. Now, it's the 11th of April, and we have Charu Chanana, market strategist from Saxo Markets, as our guest today. Charu, as always, good to have you on the show.
Hi, Brian. It's really a great feeling to be back with you again.
Now, Charu, before we come and get your insights, we're going to take a look and see how the numbers stack up across the region. But we will start with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is at 30,112, so it's breached the 30,000 mark. It's up 6.67%. Ethereum is nudging towards 2,000. It's at 1,918. It's up 3.2%. Now, looking across the regional stock markets, we start with the SGX, where you're at, it's down 0.12%. Bursa Malaysia is, however, up 0.11%. Shanghai is down 0.38%. The ASX All Ordinaries is up 1.25%. The Nikkei is up 1.27%. The Hang Seng is up 0.19%. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is up 1.44%. Charu, your take on market performance in the first half of the day?
Yeah, Brian, it looks like, overnight markets actually did give us a bit of a risk off mood, but Asia markets have turned that over. And that's especially coming from, I think, Bank of Korea's hold decision today. And I think that's why we see the Korean stock market outperforming among the others. And Warren Buffett has been showing some interest in Japanese stocks. So that's obviously played out in the performance of the Japanese equity markets as well today. So the overall, the sentiment has turned a little bit positive. But you did point out Bitcoin, crossing over 30,000. I think that's really interesting today, getting a lot of attention from, traders, because I think it is, at some point when the banking crisis happened, there were conversations that Bitcoin could be an alternative source of value, an alternative source of storage of your cash. So I'm not sure how much that is true, but right now what we're seeing in the crypto industry is a lot of momentum trading coming through. So I think that's one of the factors. And secondly, last year when we had those meltdowns in some of the key coins and the crypto industry in general, a lot of speculative positions were wiped out. So the liquidity in the market, I think, is really thin at the moment. So I would not really make much of this move that we are seeing in Bitcoin right now.
Okay, that's an interesting thing. Liquidity in the crypto market is a little bit thin. That's something, obviously, then doesn't take a lot to move markets.
Yeah.
Now, so I want to zoom in on something you just mentioned about Warren Buffett taking an interest in Japanese stocks. And then obviously this, I wonder if it's coincidental, the BOJ's Ueda's press conference. Tell us about that and what your thoughts are around that press conference.
Yeah, so yesterday's press conference was his first appearance as the governor of the Bank of Japan after Kuroda stepped down on the 8th of April. So I think it was pretty interesting because he still signaled policy continuity. And that is obviously, yeah, like you said, has been giving a bit of a bid to Japanese stocks together with Warren Buffett. Yeah, I mean, coincidental for sure, but both the factors are helping Japanese stocks right now. So now, but the thing with Ueda is that in his parliamentary appearance earlier, he did signal that he may be open to some tweaks in the policy if there are pressures from the markets. Now, I think market participants will continue to keep that in their minds and continue to expect some kind of a tweak from him. So I think this month we can potentially see a lot of volatility in the Japanese yen because the first meeting for the new governor will be at the end of the month, 27th, 28th April. So I think until then, there will be a lot of expectations still building in. And depending on also how US yields, I think, traverse, if we continue to see a lot of weak economic data out of the US and US yields drop back again, I think there is some reason to believe that we could see some potential strength in the Japanese yen getting into that meeting for the BOJ on 27th, 28th of April.
Charu, as China opened up, a lot of investors were looking at China to literally be the savior of markets across the region as it opened up its markets. However, The inflation number has just come in this morning, and it came in at a reading that was lower than expected at 0.7%. What's your view on this, and how should we be positioning ourselves then, given this data?
I mean, certainly it does look like economic growth hasn't picked up as many had expected. But if you look at the PMI numbers, they were still relatively strong above expectations this month. So I think the recovery is gaining traction. It is particularly not at the pace at which we started to price it in, but I think I would still be positioned for a Chinese reopening, Chinese recovery story in the markets right now. And this, the CPI number that you just mentioned, of course, it's weaker than expected. Again, a signal that recovery isn't as much as expected, but it is also, in a way, kind of giving a signal that we could see some more policy accommodation, some more, easy policy measures from the PBOC, and that again, just means that we could see the recovery pick up later on this year.
Now, there's a lot of movement around oil markets, especially with the OPEC plus cuts last week. What should we be watching out for that will influence oil markets moving forward?
So, in the very short term, I do think that the oil prices will focus a lot more on market fundamentals now, because the surprise cut by OPEC has actually driven out a lot of speculators again from the crude oil market. So, I think that does mean that the market will reflect the demand supply fundamentals better. And in the very short term, again, I think the supply story has already been priced in. So, it is more about the demand story and where US economic data, kind of goes from here, how Fed rate expectations, move from here. So if we continue to see maybe like inflation data is due this week in the US, if we see higher than expected print there, we will still continue to price in more Fed rate hikes, which is a concern on oil demand. That just means that the demand will be weaker than expected. So, I think there's still a downside bias there for crude oil prices if economic data in the US is still more hawkish, where, growth is weakening, but inflation is still strong.
All right, we're going to take a note of that downside pressure on oil markets. With that, Charu, thank you very much for your insights. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Brian. It was such a pleasure.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Charu Chanana, market strategist from Saxo Markets, on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch, powered by the Private Pension Administrator of Malaysia, the central administrator for private retirement schemes. This video and podcast will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.